Hello everybody and welcome to Organian's Puzzle Box. In today's video, I'm very excited to present to you the brand new project that I've just created and added on Fab called the Decal Forge. This particular project is part of the Forge series, is part of the World Forge, Cloud Forge, Atmos Forge, Surface Forge. So yeah, it's like a trend, right? But the Decal Forge by default is part of the Surface Forge project. So if you have the Surface Forge, you will also have this new Decal Forge, now upgraded and better than before. It is now blueprint driven, it works on any surface, it's got Parallax Occlusion Mapping, it also has self shadows that are reactive to the directional light, it has masking, it has aligned to surface, it can also be added onto different surfaces and you don't have to hide or remove decals from certain static meshes. You can now just use a masking parameter to do so. It speeds up the workflow tremendously. It can be used to fake in windows, doors, handles, sockets, all sorts of things, right? It's actually a very transformative workflow and it just adds so much more genuine detail to your scene. Normally you'd have to go through things like pipelines of modeling and doing all sorts of crazy things, but with Decal Forge you can just drop in a surface straight away, use Parallax Occlusion Mapping to give it depth, get a directional light to enhance it further with shadows, and you get a nice looking detailed scene. It takes a fraction of the work that it normally would have to create this. I mean, if you look at some of the footage that I'm showing, you've got like a very bland building that is now peppered with all sorts of details just by using decals alone and nothing else. This particular project, as I said, is available part of the Surface Forge asset, but it also comes standalone if you want to get it that way. It's available on Patreon, Gumroad, ArtStation, Fab, and on my own website, if that interests you. Either way, without any further ado, let's actually go through all the options. I know this is quite an extensive video, and the reason why I've made it so long is because I mean, there's a lot of options, honestly. There's a lot of options to cover because the Decal Forge is that I think that extensive. So let's begin. And here we are in the example level for the Decal Forge. I want to just go through all the options that are available for the Decal Forge and what the functionality of the blueprint is. So we're not going to start obviously with the first panel because there's just an introduction of what this level is about, but we're going to go to our first example here, which is a classic example of how to use a decal. We have in here a floor setup. So this is a floor decal with some cobblestone. And as you can see, this decal is projected onto the floor, onto these meshes, and it's got self shadows and it's also blending with the surface all around it based on a mask value. So in here where the mask is not feathered away, the decal is very clear and the mask intensity is to 100%. And as it fades away to all the sides, it kind of just fades in and the height blends with the surface. So that's a classic example, like I've said, for a floor surface. The next one here, we have a sand plus stone decal. So in here, you can see the shadows being casted by the stone over there, and then this patch of sand all around it. Obviously, the immersion of a decal gets broken if you look at it from like this side or, anything from a very steep angle, from a very shallow angle. But overall, if you look above it, then it's all fine and great. And obviously you can always adjust this height if it's too much. But this is just an example where you can use a non-tileable texture to add more details to the scene. And over here we have the same sand patch, but without the stone in the middle. So this is a tileable section, setup of sand. So if we actually scale this up in any direction, we should be able to basically see how that looks like. Let me just make sure that I, untick the lock aspect ratio. And as you can see right now, we can just extend this as far as we want, and then the decal automatically adjusts the texture tiling so that it looks very good. So as you can see, it's like, you could obviously build an entire level with this if you really wanted to. So this is a tileable masked stamp decal. So we're using a mask to feather it out in the center and all over the sides. And this is another one where it's using a custom map. So this mask is part of the base color. We're using the RGB for the base color, and the alpha is embedded within that same texture so that it allows us to have this custom mask here. This is also useful when you want to do things like numbers or letters or things like that, because I would recommend that you put the alpha of those within the RGB channel itself. But obviously you can modify the shader to make it different if you would like. Now, another thing that these decals can be used is for things like vents. So right now you can see in here, it's using a custom mask to generate this vent. It's the same vent in all three surfaces, but it's just an example to show you. And also the Decal Forge comes with a function called an angle fade parameter. This allows you to basically put a decal into the world like this one here. And instead of it kind of, warping and stretching across a surface, instead of going into this, static mesh over here and just saying, you know what, I want to go and disable receive decals. If you do that, then sure, no decal will affect this mesh anymore, but maybe you want another type of decal to affect it, and you don't just want to remove it from the list of pool of meshes that could be affected by decals. So this is where the angled fade comes in. Right now, in this particular event, the angle fade is set to 0, which means that this texture is now stretching across. And if you have a look here, if you select the decal, if we make this bigger, you can see that the decal will just stretch more and more on top of this cone shape here. But if we actually go into our decal angle fall off here, and let's say we put this over to 1, you can see there it's already got rid of most of that, but we could also increase it and thus eliminating that stretching entirely. So we're masking that decal from affecting any type of angle that is not a straight angle onto the floor that's affecting currently the decal. But obviously, as you increase the slider, the amount of the angle allowed where the decal can spawn lowers or intensifies. And over here we have a decal without the Parallax Occlusion Mapping enabled or shadows enabled, because in these examples we had parallax occlusion and shadows. And you can see here as well, it's got angle fade and it's not affecting anything, right? In the next one, I want to just show you how the aligned surface works. So basically, you can take a decal, maybe this one here, and let's say you want to project it onto the surface. You just click the button over here, align the surface, and you'll notice that it automatically then moves to that shape. It's just calculating in a top-down position. So if it was top-down, it would be like this, right? Obviously, the pointer indicates if the decal is looking up or down. And then when you click the align the surface, then it will check to see if there's a static mesh underneath, and then it will project to that. Now, in this particular event, these parts here of this level are part of a blueprint, and they're not static meshes as per se. So it's not actually detecting it in order to attach to it, but it will detect things like this surface here. As you've noticed there, it just automatically did it. If we take this one, for example, and we drag it like that, put it here, and then again, align the surface. Now it's currently looking for a surface while this tick box is enabled. And if we rotate it, it has detected this surface. So now it's projected itself onto it. You see, that's as simple as it is. And then this automatically gets disabled, but if you press the button again, it will align again. Now, in the next example, I'm showing you how we can effectively create decal shapes onto the landscape that look like geometry, but they're actually just textures projected onto the mesh. So in the left side here, we have the static mesh itself. So this is an actual window. And if we have a look, this is the geometry. It's quite a heavily, quite a heavy geometry kind of window. But over in here, we have a decal that's representing this window. So it's effectively the same thing, but in one of the examples is just a cheaper version, being this decal, and over here being this mesh. And they're all put onto a wall that's also a decal, as you can see right here. And it's also got a floor over here of some more of that decal. And even though they're overlapping a little bit, you actually have a decal sort order, which is this one here, where you can enable to see if the brick or the window takes over. So for example, right now, if this sort order of the window was 0, and if these bricks were sort order of 1, for example, you've just noticed that it completely engulfed the window and the window is now gone. But if we select the window again and we set this to 2, then the window is overtaking the bricks. And that's kind of how you can layer decals, although I would strongly recommend that you don't put too many decals on top of each other, because they are going to cause more and more performance issues as you build them up. Now, some very quick other examples of the decal. So right now here, I am using it for sockets. You could put these like, plug sockets onto a wall, or they could be used as numbers. So for example, you could have the number 30 or whatever number you want. You could even have a number generator or a letter generator or text, so that's not a problem. You can just use this for whatever sort of need you've got. And also you can invert the height of the decal so that it basically syncs with the, you can see here that the surface that is blending with is on top of the decal, so the decal is effectively sinking into the ground rather than being above. And if we go over here into the blueprint and we actually look at the height, we can actually put it that way, you know, so right now the decal is higher than the surface that it's coming from. But if you, so like that, and if you put it this way, then now it's lower. So that's how that works. You can invert it or put it back in. And then this is just kind of an explanation of how this works. We're taking a tiling texture, which has a tiling height map, which is using an alpha mask on top to then give us the final output, which is, for example, this brick over here, brick layer. And the mask, you see that mask over there where the dark spots are, is masking the decal, so it's not showing up in every possible point. And then in the next example here, it's all about rotation of the directional light. So you'll notice that there is a shadow being casted here by the decal. And if we actually try to rotate the directional light, you'll notice that these shadows do change as the directional light changes itself as well in the world, because they are reactive to that. Now bear in mind that these are only self-shadowing, meaning that the decal cannot project any shadows on top of another surface unless it's its own surface. So it can only cast shadow on itself. It's kind of like a fake parallax occlusion mapping effect. But here's another trick. You can actually disable the parallax occlusion by clicking this tick box over here, but we still have the shadows on. Now, obviously this means that also this decal is a bit more expensive than without the shadows. So part of the parallax occlusion mapping is still running, but you just don't have any parallax occlusion geometry, fake geometry. But if you do disable the shadows, now the shadows are gone, and now we just have a flat decal. But we can also bring parallax occlusion map back. Maybe you don't want any shadows, so you don't actually have to use them. Or you can enable the shadows, and you can see right there, they are now back on. Now in the next thing here, I'm going to show you that the default Unreal Engine decal, if you drop it into a level and onto a vertical surface like here, you'll notice this odd slicing here in the middle, and that's because it's not properly rotating the decal to the world, to world align it properly, to world transform it, so that the view, the camera view actually sees it as, you know, reflective of where you're looking from, what point of view you've got, and so on. With the Decal Forge, we've got that resolved. And as you can see on this surface here, it doesn't matter, it's the same surface, it doesn't matter where I'm looking at it from, you know, I'm just kind of pushing the height there very much. It will look good no matter what. So again, these are parallax occlusion mapping textures. You may want to not be as close to the surface as like this. So you kind of have to like place your decals in a way that, you know, your character isn't looking at them from the side, because that just breaks the effect basically. Like, you know what I mean? Like this is just still a flat surface, but it's kind of creating this effect of depth, right? But we have no slicing with the Decal Forge, while with the standard parallax occlusion mapping from Unreal Engine, we do have slicing. Okay, so that's kind of a general presentation of the of what the Decal Forge comes with. Now I want to show you the example of this building over here. Okay, and I want to show you what a multitude of decals combined with each other can do for your level without having to drop a single mesh, because you're just adding these textures on top of surfaces that you've got. We've obviously got the base mesh, which is this building and this floor, but there's nothing else here apart from decals and a standard texture across the whole surface. So I'm going to show you that, and then after that we're just going to go through the blueprint options, and that should conclude this video. Okay, so this is actually a level packed instance, so I'm just going to right click it and go to level and press edit. Now this allows me to just edit this entire level and all of its decals inside of it. Now here's the funny thing. If I go over here, because this is all separated by, well, we've got them all in like folders and stuff. If I select all these decals like that, and then I press the, you know, the eye over here to make them disappear, this is what we've got in this level. There is only this building, which has a texture on it, and then this floor and some cube shapes around here for the windows. And then we have that static mesh of that window that I showed you earlier. So that's everything that we have on this building. But once I add in the decals, you can see just how much more, vibrancy, just how much more of the environment just builds up with these decals. So let's just have a look at what we got here. Well, we've got some vents here at the top, which obviously they're not right, they're not very good vents for this particular building. They look like brand new vents on a very dilapidated building, but you get the idea, right? So we've got those vents. We've got a decal over here for some bricks. So if we remove this, you'll notice it's just a wall there, but these add more surface detail. Then we have it over here as well. So if I select this decal, you'll notice that we've got some more bricks over here. Then we have this particular one here, which is just adding a bit of more interesting shape onto the wall itself. We also have these bricks. So if I find the right decal, now that's the rust one. So I just need to kind of select the one that's controlling the bricks. This is another kind of surface rust over there on the bottom. Generally, it's going to be a bit more difficult to get them right. If you don't, you'd probably want to sort them. I might in the near future actually add the idea of coloring these pointers. So maybe all the, stains are the color green, right? The decal pointer is green, and maybe all the ones that are bricks are going to be the color of red. So then you know exactly which of these pointers, what do they all represent, right? Or maybe like a text tag that you can type in there, and that will just tell you what it is, part of what group, right? And then we've got some decals for numbers, and you can see in here this one, right? And we're using sorting to make this decal be underneath this other surface. And then we're using these, again, sorting over here to make that rust and the brick combine. Then we have here, we've got the rust kind of coming through onto this window, but it's not coming through on this window. It's also affecting this vent and this vent, but it wasn't affecting this vent, for example, because that's just kind of how I've done it with the sorting. But then you look at the floor, we also have this sand, right? We've got sand over here, we've got cobblestone, we've also got this particular rock over here, some more cobblestone. And what's very interesting is that the cobblestone can have various different colors based on, how many decals you've got. So for example, if I select this decal over here, which it seems is this cobblestone, you'll notice that we do have a tint color. So maybe I can make it a pink if that's something that you want to do, or a blue or anything like that. We can change the tint of that in, very quickly, so that we can then author the scene very rapidly using these blueprints, right? Then I can obviously change any of these decals. So for example, maybe I want this to be a bit further here, and then I also want to scale it like that. And you'll notice how the texture automatically aligns itself to the new scale, so the tiling isn't broken just because you scale the decal up and down on its surface. I mean, it would be very problematic if every time you scale up the decal, tiling also needed to be adjusted. It would be such a pain in the ass. So I've made it as pain-free in the ass as possible. So yeah, that's actually quite good. So this is just an example of what we can do with these, just building up this scene. And here's the thing, obviously I can save the level pack there, and I can press play. And now I am using a third-person character just to move around. By the way, I will add a demo soon as well, so people can actually play the demo and go and have a look at these decals. But as you can see, I can walk on top of these surfaces quite nicely. My character isn't receiving decals, but look at that texture detail, look at that ground detail. You wouldn't really be getting such a nice ground with just a plain texture without parallax occlusion mapping. And really, just to point this out, I'm going to select here the sand, right? So I think this is the sand. Yeah, there we go. And I'm just going to disable parallax occlusion mapping, and I'm also going to disable shadows. Let me just do that. Oh, there we go. Right, so now we have no more parallax occlusion mapping for this particular texture. You saw it how it was with parallax. Right now it's without. Now I'm just going to save this level, and then I'm going to press play again and just run over to that area, right? So I'm just moving very quickly. And now the surface looks a lot less interesting. I'm not saying it's still not good. It's still pretty good, right? We know when we look at it, but it's definitely lacking that sense of depth that it had previously when the decal was, using parallax occlusion mapping. You can see how solid the wall looks like they're actually very well made. You get close to here, you look here, this looks like bricks. I mean, definitely looks like some bricks. This window is obviously the static mesh, so that's fine, but this one is the decal. Now, obviously, if you go like that, you will start to kind of see that it's kind of breaking apart because it's not actual geometry, but look how close I am and how good it looks. I mean, it still feels very 3D, but I am telling you, this is a decal. This is not, like, look at this, right? I am actually walking with this character right now, and these bricks still look as if they have some form of depth, but they don't. They're just parallax occlusion mapping. But I've done my very best with how I changed the, the shader code, the HLSL code for parallax occlusion mapping, and how it's calculating this to mitigate those problems and keep a nice consistent look when you get up close to these surfaces. Obviously, the corners will never look good just like that, so I would definitely recommend that you use some form of a trim here to make it look a lot more believable, maybe even use actual geometry. So now that we've covered all of that, let's start having a look at the options that are in the blueprints. Okay, now we have an example decal over here and an example surface to work with. The first thing I want to do, basically this happens whenever you drop in the Decal Forge. So as an example, if I browse to the asset and I just drop it over here, you'll notice that it always drops like this, and you want to rotate it. This is what the Decal Forge will come up with, basically showing you these stock numbers, so number 1. And then you start changing the textures and the mask. But we'll use, a far more better looking texture. Obviously, we just got the sand over here. So with the decal selected, we want to have a look and see, basically the pointer is showing where the surface is projecting to. So right now it's pointing downwards. And we have in here the tick box for enabling shadows, and this can be enabled without parallax occlusion mapping. And as you can see, it's kind of creating a bit of a shadow effect over there. It's not great without parallax occlusion, but it's an option. Now, if we click enable POM, now we're getting parallax occlusion mapping as well. And you can see that shadow is looking a lot better. And if we do change the directional light, you'll notice that this shadow can be casted, bigger or smaller, but you'll notice that it will never actually go onto the surface underneath, only on itself. So keep that in mind. Okay, the next thing, we've got a lined surface, which is something that I showed you guys earlier, but I'm going to do it again. So if I put this decal up here, and then I press align to surface, you'll notice that it has now aligned it to this surface rather than this surface. And if I take it over like that, and I press align to surface, it will now align it to this surface, which is very useful, and it allows you to quickly author your scene based on the geometry that you have around. The next thing you got is the decal pointer scale, so in case you need these to be bigger or smaller, but you can also hide them completely or bring them back. Now, I wouldn't really recommend that you hide the pointer, because then you can't really click the decal anymore. I know you think you might be able to, but you're not going to be able to click it unless you go to the outliner and select it from here. So I definitely recommend keeping the pointer unless you really need to hide it. But if you press G on the keyboard, the decal will disappear. And if you render or play the level, the decal pointer will disappear. Right, next thing, we've got the decal sort order. So if we have 2 decals, and let's say this one is, they're both the sort order 0. If this one is sort order 1, then it will effectively overtake any decal that's sort order 0 or any number, right, as you go up. But just bear in mind that the higher the number, the more the performance cost. Okay, next thing that you got here is a decal angle fall off. So as an example, if I put it over here, you'll notice that the decal is also going up this slope. Well, let's say we don't want that. Well, you can increase this angle fall off all the way to, maybe 1000. And as you can see now, it's completely masked from affecting that surface. But as you go down, it will start affecting that surface again. And if you go into the minus, it will actually kind of go on itself. So it will actually even project onto full spheres or circles or whatever, right? So that's something to bear in mind. Now, the next thing we're going to see here is the lock aspect ratio. So right now we can scale the decal in any direction we want, like that, and even up and down, but up and down doesn't really do anything unless you're considering performance cost, because the higher that domain is, the more performance it will cost, because it will sample more. So see how big this box is right now? Well, effectively what you want to do, you don't want to make it any bigger than the surface that you're trying to project to. So this in reality should be probably this big, right? And then you just go in here and align the surface, and that's how big it is, right? And maybe you might need to squish a little bit more of that scale. I don't know, but obviously you'll know more if you need to. So align the surface, and that's the amount that you kind of need, right? But it really depends on how also how tall your height will be. So right now I'm just going to keep it around that point. Now the next thing we've got here is as I said, the lock aspect ratio. When you click that on, any scale that you do in any direction, see right now it's kind of not even allowing me to, well, it is allowing me to, it won't allow me to go on this side, but if I go onto this axis, it will make the decal as big as, you know, in all directions equally. Now, the reason why it's not allowing me to go in the other axis is because it's already kind of scaled a little bit on that. So that's where the problem comes from. But if you reset this to 1, and in theory, now we should allow it. All right, this is a bit of a bug. But anyway, I'll look into that. But as you can see, if you scale in any real direction, like, you know, this direction, it seems, it will then scale the whole thing with that lock aspect ratio. Now we're going to go over here to have a look at our textures. So right now we load up the base color, normal, and ORD. ORD stands for occlusion, roughness, and displacement. Make sure that you're using that, otherwise it will not function correctly with Parallax Occlusion Mapping. But I do have tutorials if you need any help with how to set up your own ORD textures. It's very simple, especially if you have access to the texture graph in Unreal Engine as a plugin, which is a free plugin for Unreal Engine 5.5 and above. Now, we are going to drop in a different texture. So I'm going to have a look into the surface folder, and you can see in here we have a lot of surfaces. So we're just going to go with this cobblestone. So I'm going to drop in the base color of the cobblestone. I'm also going to drop in the normal map. And as you can see, it's using currently the height information of the sand. So now I'm going to drop in the cobblestone one. And this is quite a nice texture. As you can see, it's creating these cobblestones very neatly. I'm also going to put the decal angle fall off to 10, so it doesn't combine with that surface anymore. And I'm going to have a look over here, maybe change the tint a little bit, make it, well, I don't know, maybe something like that. Yeah, I think that's way too dark, so yeah, something like that, right? So I've added a bit of a tint there. And now I've got texture tiling, so I can obviously play around with this. I'm just going to leave it to 2. I can also offset the texture if I'm not really happy with how it looks like based on the offset. And then I can also play with ambient occlusion intensity. So if you increase the contrast and the intensity, you'll get darker patches on the AO because it's effectively bringing that fake ambient occlusion within the cracks of the cobblestone. So again, you may not want to use this, but it is set to 0.5 by default, which is the default value for this. And then you have specular intensity. So right now, if we look towards the directional light, it's using a intensity of 0.3, but we can obviously crank this up. I'm not even sure if it's that visible for this surface, but basically we can add a bit of specular intensity in here, right? Normally I would keep this to 0, but again, you can play around with it a little bit with it, but your surface also has to kind of support a little bit of specular intensity. And we can also make it more metallic or less. So right now it's set to 0, but we can set it to 1, so it's like a fully metallic surface. Anyway, going forward, we also have in here a opacity mask detail contrast. So this is allowing us to blend the mask plus the height information of the decal. So let's keep it to 0, for example. We can also invert that mask like this. So you can see now we just inverted the value of the mask. We can also increase the radius of the strength of this mask. We can also increase the mask intensity like that. As you can see, it's just creating sharper control. We can also increase the mask hardness, which I know it kind of feels like it does the same thing as intensity, but it's not, because if, for example, if we're decreasing the radius, you can see what the hardness is doing. But if we're decreasing that hardness, you can see it's kind of creating a feathering effect. But if you're decreasing the mask intensity overall, it's kind of like going to fade to 0. So if you want, you can have a high mask intensity with a low hardness, and you can then play around with the radius. So you can see just how many intricate kind of details it can create, because we can now choose another mask in here. Maybe we want to, well, actually, let me just search for masks directly. And we have a lot of different masks in here, but maybe I'm going to go for something like this and drop that in. And as you can see, it's just kind of created this little rounded patch in here. like that. Maybe this is, see I've just created a bit of a shape there with it. So it's actually quite neat, and there's a lot of experimentation to be had with these, right? So I'm just trying to like find a nice kind of balance here between, you see what I mean? It's like that's how nice it can look. And obviously I'm just keeping this to 0, otherwise it will just blend more of the height with the mask. But then we also have this height strength here, which right now doesn't really do much, but if we increase this number and now we play with the height strength, you can kind of see just what kind of effect we can get. See how we've just now created a custom shape of these tileable textures of the cobblestone. We obviously also have a decal opacity, which is not very useful right now for cobblestone, but it can be used for other surfaces. And we can also change the tiling of this mask, as you can see, and just have more combinations of the same mask if you'd like, right? Now, going further down, we have the minimum steps and maximum steps of the Parallax Occlusion Mapping. So these, the higher they are, the more performance they cost. And you can actually measure this performance cost by going over here where it says performance debug and turning this up to 1. And now you can see the performance cost of this parallax occlusion mapping is white, which means very costly. So you can play around with these steps, and you can see as we decrease the steps, we are getting a better coloring there. We can also decrease the max steps. We can obviously put them to 0 if you'd like. And if you look head on, the cost of the decal is the lowest. But if you look from the side, now it's when the shader kind of kicks in to show you that height information. And you can see that it's turning a bit more red. But if we take the performance debug off entirely, and right now we're using 0 steps on minimum and maximum, and I'm using a dithering kind of approach to create this, which is causing a bit of noise right here. This is why the effect on 0 is not really bad, as in the default parallax occlusion map shader, because I'm using a dithering noise. But as we increase these steps, you'll notice right there, I'm not sure if it's very visible, but you'll see how that noise kind of fades away. So we could probably get away with a minimum step of 8 and a maximum step of 16. Already now the noise is pretty much gone, but when you are in motion, the noise might come back a little bit. So you may want to increase your steps. Your mileage may vary depending on what you're looking for. And then we also have the parallax occlusion mapping depth, so how high the height is actually protruding, either upwards or downwards. So we can push this really high, and then we can have a look at the reference plane. Is this going up, or is it sinking, or is it going up? So you decide. Right now 0.5 means that it's equally looking up and down onto the surface, right? So the middle point is in the center. So I'm going to use a default value of 0.1, which I think is quite nice. And then we have the shadow intensity. So if you decrease, I know it's kind of counterintuitive. If you decrease the number, the shadow becomes a lot more intense. And if you decrease it, it kind of whites out. You also have a shadow normal fade, which is kind of helping with the smoothness of this. So again, you want to for example, increase the intensity, but then play around a little bit with the normal fade, which for some reason I'm not really getting the result that I'm looking for. So let me just try and push it to negative, and then just using this normal fade a little bit here, which is a bit, yeah, there we go. Something like that. So it just gives us a more natural looking shadow without being completely pitch black. And then the next thing we've got is we can invert the height of this, right? So as you can see right now, the cobblestone is underneath the surface it's projecting to, or it can be above like that, okay? So then if you put it underneath, you're gonna have to play around with the mask again to make it so that it fits with the new setup. One final thing, you've probably not noticed or seen me rotating these in any particular way, so let me just dispel this as well, that it does work. When you do rotate, you'll see that the texture kind of breaks from the parallax occlusion mapping, but once you let go, it's fine. But there is a caveat that I've yet to resolve, and I will be working on resolving this. The shadows are currently still in tangent space, and I need to convert them, so I've yet to make that modification and fix this. Basically what this means is that even though directional light is over there, the shadows are pointing towards it right now. But if I go in here and rotate the this decal back to 0 like this, the shadows are now displaying correctly. So still working on a solution. If you guys do have a solution, let me know. But in the meantime, this is what I got so far. So just wanted to point that out. And that's about it. That's everything that we have about the Decal Forge so far in version 1.0. But I am going to release a demo for it, and we'll be adding this to the Surface Forge project as well. And that is the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed the new project that I've unveiled. I hope you are going to give it a chance. I think it's actually going to make quite a big difference for your workflow. But if you need further support, contact me on Discord or on Patreon, anywhere that you find me, even on YouTube in the comment section below. If you are interested, just, as I said, message me. I'm happy to help, and I'm happy to provide a sample project if that's what you want. I am planning on posting a demo of this as well, so you can just play around and run around the level just to see what the quality is like. But I hope this video showed enough. A huge thank you to all of my Patreon supporters and all the YouTube members and all the Gumroad members. You guys make this stuff happen. And to all the people that have bought assets in my Fab store and has helped me to develop these projects further. Thank you, and I'll see you guys in the next tutorial. Keep creating.